Welcome back to my YouTube channel and podcast, Wonders and Miracles, where we get to celebrate miraculous moments in everyday lives. I'm your host, Liza Lawrence, and I'm so happy to have you join me today as we talk with Stefani from Idaho. I first met Stefani about 4 years ago when I was building my house and looking for help with interior design. I was totally overwhelmed. And Stefani was recommended to me, and I'm so grateful for her talents and her help with such an overwhelming project for me. But today, she will share her personal journey of being the wife and mother of loved ones who have struggled with substance abuse. So often, it's when we are in our most painful experiences that we find purpose, miracles, and God. So if you love miracle stories and want to hear more, hit the like and subscribe button so you can catch all the inspiring and uplifting episodes of real people sharing real miracles. So Stefani, thank you for being here and being willing to share this story, and go ahead and share with us all your journey.
All right. I think I have to preface before everything kind of showed its ugly side. I have to preface it with Roger and I, my husband Roger, we both come from broken homes. And we both had a real unstable foundation growing up. Just keep that in mind as you listen to my story, because it has a lot to do with it. We met and married, and we married very quickly. I was only 18 when we got married, and we had known each other for not very long. So we married quickly and jumped right into family life. We had our first son within a year and a half of being married, and then 4 after that. So we had 5 kids within 11 years. Really fast little marathon there of having children. When our first son was born, my husband decided that he wanted to find a belief system, a faith tradition, and he wanted to find a religion. So we ended up searching for the right fit, and he joined a church that I had been familiar with. I had gone to as a child. At first, we thought that by joining this church and going all in on that all the things from our past, all of the destructive behaviors that we had dabbled in maybe as teenagers and young adults, that all of those were going to be far, far in the rearview mirror, because we had found this. And for many people, religion, spirituality, it does that for them, and they don't, it doesn't have to creep back in. But in my naive mind, I thought that any addiction issues were long gone. I didn't understand addiction. Roger and I clearly didn't have a full grasp on our childhood traumas and the things that we were dealing with and trying to overcome. And we were so busy raising this little family of ours that took all of our thought and energy. We really didn't have much time to work on ourselves as individuals. The marriage was really good. It was really good. I mean, it had its ups and downs, but overall, it has always been a good marriage. Fast forward, we started a business. My husband's really, really talented at what he does. We opened a car dealership. He did really well. It found success, and he was serving the community, and the community was really grateful for his services. So that was wonderful, all in, except it took a great toll on him. It was really stressful. Just the stress of having a family, owning a business, being in a high demand religion, all of those things were really hard for him. And I didn't quite know to the extent that his stress was taking the toll that it was. I did not know. I just thought that, if we continue on just on this path that we have chosen, that everything will work out, everything will be fine. Our oldest son, he decided to leave the house for our church. He decided to leave and spread the gospel message. And he was far away. He went to Chile, and he was far, far away. And that was a tough thing as a mom, to just allow him to go and be gone so far away and not be able to speak to him at that time. That's how things were set up. I wasn't able to talk to him. And he began to have some severe issues with depression and anxiety. It got to the point where he was thinking of taking his life. So he came home like he should have. And after that, everything in the family was a little different. It's not because of my son. It was because there was just all this underlying, there were so many expectations that we were trying to meet within our religious beliefs, within our culture. We wanted the best for our family, but we didn't have the tools that we needed as individuals. After our son came home, we really suffered as a family, especially my son and especially my husband. We didn't know how to help our son. It was all foreign to us. His depression and anxiety had never manifested itself before. So this was all new. And that was the beginning of a lot of change, beginning of tremendous struggle and tremendous growth for our family. When our son came home, I just jumped right into figuring out whatever I could to help him. And therein lies a little bit of the story that is really important. I now know that I suffer with codependency. And so having this kind of problem to be solved for one of my children, it was my mission. I don't know if you or your listeners are aware of the definition of codependency, but it says a codependent person is one who has let another person's behavior affect him or her, and who is obsessed with controlling that person's behavior. And I would also add not just behavior, but just saving. I was a saver, and I would give everything I had to save others. If others were happy, I was happy. If others were sad, I was sad. Now, you might hear that and think, well, wait a second, we're supposed to be full of empathy and long suffering and, and have a charitable heart. And yes, all of those things are wonderful, but codependency is an actual disease that takes things to a whole nother level. So I couldn't wait to solve my son's problem. And when he got home, I just put everything, all of myself into that. And by doing, I really kind of became disconnected with the needs of the others around me and my family. With my other children, I became disconnected with their needs and what was going on in their lives, and with my husband. Now, this is the point where my husband, his old vices, his old demons, they really resurfaced. The stress, and I'm going to use the word shame here. We, as a couple, had used shame a lot in our home as we were raising our children. Not intentionally, but because we had thought that is how we get our kids to do this thing, or be on this path, or be a certain way. And so unknowingly, there was a lot of shame there. Looking back on that, I could just go back and just give myself the biggest hug, because as a mom, any mom knows, sometimes we default to behaviors and methods that are not healthy. So there was shame. Roger felt shamed. I'm sure all of my children felt shamed. It was a painful, dark time. And that is when Roger started leaning on substance use, which was a thing of his past, his young adult years. That's when he went back to that as something to kind of numb out all of those feelings of shame and pain and feelings of guilt that he has done something wrong. I told Roger this morning, I said, I'm not going to vilify you. I hold your story with such respect. And that is the honest truth. We all do. All of us, all the children have given him so much grace. So as we move forward in the story, I don't want you to feel like I'm vilifying him. I have his permission to share his story, and he wants all of it to be shared. So that was the spring of 2016. And I was so distracted by saving, doing whatever I could do to help my son and my other children. I really was blind to what was going on. By the summer of 2016, I knew something wasn't quite right. I thought it was just a mental health issue. He had been on medication for mental health. He'd been seeing a therapist. So certainly that's all it was, right? Even though looking back, I feel like subconsciously I knew, but I just couldn't bring myself to believe the thing I didn't want to believe. So behavior started getting a little more erratic. Things weren't quite right. He was never to the point where he was missing in action. He came home every night. He continued to be a dad and do the very best he could. And looking back on that time, my heart just aches for him because being controlled by addiction is a very lonely thing. And he was suffering greatly. We got an opportunity in the fall of 2016 to move from our home that we had been at for nearly 15 years and that we had built to move to a beautiful property, 6 acres, big home. And because I am interested in design, we had plans for a huge remodel. And I look back on this often thinking, was I really supposed to move? Was I really supposed to leave my home that we built and raised our children in? And I do feel like that, yes, that was supposed to happen for many, many hard reasons. But that was a difficult thing. And I think we chose to leave because it was a great distraction. It was a great distraction. We were all kind of on these islands, so to speak, on our own little island, suffering, hurting in our own ways. I thought, okay, this is it. This is what will bring us back together. We're going to move. So we did. We moved, and oh boy, that is when things hit the fan. That's when things got really hard. I continued to pray all the time for God to help Roger to change Roger, increase his capacity, calm his mind, all of these things that were symptoms of his disease that I didn't realize were going on. But I just was desperately praying that God would do something to help my husband and help me to be able to live with him and be more tolerant of him. Well, miracle number 1 happened in January of 2017. I went out to the car and there it was, just sitting there. And my heart just sunk because everything made sense. And I know that that was a miracle because God allowed me to discover what was going on in a way that Roger couldn't deny it, couldn't twist the story. When people in the throes of addiction are very good at twisting reality and gaslighting and making you feel like you're crazy, but you're not. And that's just a symptom of their disease. That's not who they are. So that was a tremendous miracle. Number 1 is that Heavenly Father revealed to me what was going on. From that point, I knew what I was dealing with, which is so critical in any hard situation. You have to know exactly what you're dealing with. There isn't a clear path forward. I confronted him. He was so broken, so sorry. And immediately, miracle number 2 happened. I was able to see Roger the way God sees Roger. I was able to see him as a child of God who's hurting, who's suffering, who's very broken. And I am so very grateful for that miracle. It could have gone very differently. I was angry. Yeah, I was resentful. I was very hurt and had right to be. But because I could see him through those eyes, it gave us a way to heal eventually. It took time. It's not something that he was able to stop immediately. So that was in January. He assured me it's over. I'm done. But throughout that whole spring and summer, the behaviors hadn't changed. If anything, they had gotten more difficult. So I knew that things were continuing to go on. And so I started testing him. And that's when, there just wasn't any hiding from it. By September of 2017, I had decided it wasn't best for me and the kids to stay near him and be in that situation. So I told him, I need you to go seek help. You need to get this under control, and or else, we have to be done. And so looking back on it, I really did give him an ultimatum. I know that might be how a lot of people end up in treatment and not initially doing it for themselves, but to save a marriage, to save a family, to save a job. And that's okay. Whatever gets you in treatment, that's a good thing. Miracle number 3 happened when, because of this huge remodel that we had just done, and we're still in the middle of, and it was a very difficult remodel, very difficult situation. The whole thing was hard. We had exhausted all of our financial resources, the business, you can imagine the addiction took a toll on the business, and that was suffering, and everything was suffering. At that time, when I reached out to treatment centers, they wanted 25,000, 30,000. So miracle number 3 happened when I started having the courage to tell my dearest, closest friends what was happening, what was going on. And I went to lunch one day with one of them, and they said, I've heard of this place. I've heard of this treatment center down in St. George. I've heard it's really good. You should look into that. The next day, I went to lunch with another friend, and that friend said, I've heard of this place down in St. George. Have you heard of it? And it was the same place. And I looked into it, and they wanted $25,000. They didn't accept insurance. So miracle number 3 happened when I spoke with another friend, and she said, I'll write you a check right now. Without any hesitation, she volunteered her finances to help our situation. And it was such a Christ-like act. I just get choked up whenever I think about it, because it was just so very, very kind. And things have gotten better, and we have since, paid them back. But boy, that's a big deal. That's a big deal to somebody who doesn't have it, who is in desperate need. It's a really big deal. So I had to swallow my pride, and I had to accept that help. And Roger agreed. He agreed to go. I will tell you, that decision to go to treatment was the scariest, hardest thing that Roger and I have ever done. And I say Roger and I because he would be gone. I would have to run the business. I would have to take care of our 5 children. I would have to continue getting the remodel finished up. All of these things all on my own. And that was a lot. There was a lot about the business that I wasn't, doing.
And how long was he to be gone at the treatment center?
And that was the unknown. We did not know. We didn't know. It was up to the treatment center, and he had to agree to that. Wow. So we had no time frame, really. Our youngest was in 5th grade, so 10. None of my children had any idea what was going on. I say that because it's a really important piece to know, that sometimes you think that an addict is the picture of just the homeless, or just the person who has lost teeth or sores all over their body. But that is just not true. That is not true. There are addicts that live a very functional life and can manage the day-to-day and can continue to keep it from their children and their spouses. Addiction, as they say in AA, it's cunning, it's baffling, and it's powerful. And it's very, very tricky. So none of the kids knew what was going on. So we had to sit them down and tell them. So the day before Roger left, the older kids who were in college came home. We all sat together as a family in the living room, and that was a hard thing to do. And I have to give credit to Roger, because his courage, he just had tremendous courage. And his love for his family was the motivation behind going and doing what he had to do to get well. He loves us very, very deeply and very much. And he's always been very dedicated to his family. The next day, Roger and I got in the car, and I drove him down, dropped him off with a couple of suitcases, and gave him a big hug, and we said goodbye. The drive home for me was, it was hard, because I had no idea what the future held. None. And remember, I'm a person who has severe codependency at the time. So not being able to control the situation, not being able to have the power to make things better, it was just unfathomable to me. It was more than I could bear. I get back home and miracle number 4 happens. I dive into running the business. And in the moment that I needed it, I was given knowledge and increased capacity to understand a lot of things that I had never understood before. Looking back on it, it truly was a miracle. God was very, very aware. He was very aware of me and very aware of each and every hard situation that each day would bring, because each day brought another discovery of, oh boy. So a couple of weeks into it, with God's help and being able to understand, I learned that the business wasn't going to, we needed to sell. We had gotten to a point where we weren't going to be able to hold on to it any longer. This was a really tough thing. We had put in 14 years into owning that business. And when we bought it, it was just a rundown shed that did mechanic work, just kind of a mud lot around it. There was nothing. So we had built it up tremendously. We put so much work into it and we were so proud of it. And Roger had put so much work into it. He's the one who really put all the work in. So to selling it while he was away, it just broke my heart. It was just such a hard decision. But I would go down to St. George every couple of weeks and visit with him and got his blessing to do so. But it was up to me. It was up to me to sell it. And that was really a tough thing to do. We ended up finding a couple of buyers. They were partners. They were eager to have it. And it felt like the right thing to do at the right time. I would say that that's miracle. I don't even know what number
5. You're
5.
on 5.
Yeah. At the time, it did not feel like a miracle at all. It felt like I was letting go of Roger's life's work. And so it felt like I was betraying him. And it was a really hard decision to make. All of our identities were wrapped up in that business, you know. It's a small community, and when you build something up like that and it's successful. So it was a harsh thing to come home to. When he did end up coming home, he came home to no job, no business, and no identity. But one morning, and he'd probably been gone at this point about 2 months. One morning I was driving the kids to school. I dropped them off. I was just driving without any music. I was in such a state of depression, barely sleeping, just hanging on by a thread. And I was just driving in this quiet car. And I clearly heard the words, "I will work a miracle in your life." And I had never had an experience like that before. I've heard of them. I was skeptical of them, but this was undeniable. I heard a voice, almost as if someone was sitting in the passenger seat of my car. And I held on to that so tightly. I'm so grateful for that message and its timing, because without it, I don't know what would have happened to my family. I don't know what decisions would have been made. Now, I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know if that meant, we'll get divorced, but we'll be okay. Everything will be all right. He's going to make a new path for me. I didn't know if it meant, we're staying together and he's going to make a full recovery and everything will be well. So after I heard those words, I knew that he was aware of me and he wasn't going to just let everything crumble to pieces. He wasn't going to destroy our lives. He was going to make a way, whatever that looked like. So that was miracle number 6. We completed the sale of the business. The kids and I made a couple of trips down to visit him as a family. Those were hard. So meanwhile, I was going through this whole experience here, but Roger was having his own whole experience there. He was learning so much. It was almost as if everything was stripped away from him. His ego, all of his crutches, all of the things that he used to prop himself up, they were all stripped away. And he had to learn and get to know who Roger was for the first time ever. he was introduced to a thing called the 12 steps. And the 12 steps are miracle number 7. And looking back on it now, I believe that the words that I heard in the car that morning, the miracle that whoever was speaking to me was referring to, was the miracle of recovery. That is the true miracle that he's worked in our lives. So step by step, Roger had to get to know himself on a very intimate level, one in which he had never known before. And when you grow up in a dysfunctional home and you start drinking or using substance at a young age, you really, the scientists behind the disease of addiction will tell you your emotional self kind of stays that age. So you don't get the opportunity to mature, emotionally mature and progress in a healthy, normal way. So Roger was learning so many things and learning so many tools to use when real life situations would come up and cause him stress. How could he work through that in a healthy way? It sounds so simple, but it's not simple at all. If you grow up in a healthy home, it just, yeah, duh. My parents modeled that for me, so I understand. But when we don't have that to our advantage, we don't know how. So he was learning a lot, and he was being very, very honest with himself. And he was shedding a lot of layers that needed to be shed, and he was facing a lot of traumas. As he was having this huge awakening down there, everything we needed was being taken care of. Everything. Every day something would happen. Somebody would show up in our lives or in our situation and help us with something we needed help with. It was just being reaffirmed to me every day that we were being taken care of and we were aware of. I ended up leaving to pick Roger up on Thanksgiving Day. I showed up the morning of Thanksgiving Day down there in St. George, and my poor kids were left at home, and my sweet daughter, she made Thanksgiving dinner all by herself. And that's a memory that we will always remember and laugh about and talk about, because it was really a lot to expect of a teenage girl. So I was making mistakes left and right too. And that was certainly one of them. But I went and I picked him up. It was as if I was putting a stranger into the car with me, or in the world of recovery in AA, they say a newborn baby. I did. I felt like I was bringing home a newborn baby from the hospital. He was so vulnerable. It was like that turtle without a shell. He was scared to death, and he didn't know what he was coming home to. He knew the business was no longer ours. He knew all of that, but what was life like now? What was it now? How do we move forward? And I bring him home, and miracle 8, my children, all of them, loved and respected their dad all the more. They were so gracious with him, and they were so proud of him. Now, mind you, at this time, we had 4 out of our 5 children were teenagers. So that could have gone very, very differently. But I'm so, so grateful to my children for the love that they extended to him. And because of that, we were able to be a family. It took all the fear away. We were able to settle into kind of a new normal, which wasn't easy. That was the hardest part of it all, really, when he came home to no job, and we had signed a non-compete, so he couldn't work in that field within the state. And that was all he knew how to do. And so it left us with a lot of questions and a lot of what now. But I then had the opportunity to go to a family workshop, which was a 3-day workshop for loved ones of addicts. And I sat there with my notepad and my pen, so ready to learn all the ways that I was justified in my anger, and learn all the ways that I was going to fix him, and learn all the ways that Roger needs this and Roger needs that, and this is what we do. And I went there fully expecting to learn those things. And when I sat down with my piece of paper and they started putting the focus on us, I just thought, hold on, time out, time out. I'm not the addict. There's nothing wrong with me. What are you talking about? And that was miracle number 9. I learned about my codependency, and I learned about how I had been contributing to the problem. Now, to clarify, I am a member of Al-Anon, and in Al-Anon, we learned that we didn't cause the addiction. We can't control the addiction, and we can't cure the addiction. So I know that I wasn't powerful enough to cause it and cure it and control it, but I definitely contributed to it. My codependency contributed to it. My lack of boundaries contributed to it. My perfectionism definitely contributed to it. My high expectations, my shame, all of those things contributed to the situation that happened within our home. I sat there for 3 days and wrote a whole notebook of information and was just soaking it up like a sponge. I did not realize that by loving him unconditionally and fixing every little problem that came up and saving him from consequences time and time again, that I was hurting the family. That was a big piece of our story, is I learned about my own addiction to codependency. So I started opening a book called The Codependence Guide to the 12 Steps. And I started in on the steps myself. And I started in on that process of tremendous self-discovery and learning all about myself, things I didn't know, traumas I needed to face, people I needed to forgive, things that I needed to let go of. There was so much I was hanging on so tightly with white knuckles. You know, if I do this, then I get this outcome. If I do this, then my kids will be this way. And I learned how to let that go. I learned the true meaning of sacrifice. I learned how to put those things on the altar and give them to God, because I couldn't do it. And I had to surrender to that. So as we both began to find our footing and work through this new life, you can imagine it was tricky. If I, use the example of a newborn baby to Roger when I brought him home, I was a stumbling toddler, falling all over the place. We had to learn new ways to communicate, new ways to respect ourselves. We had to put boundaries in place. Both of us had to put boundaries in place. And I'll tell you what, if you have never had experience with that practice, it's really hard. It's a really hard thing to learn how to do. So for the first 6 months outside of recovery, things were very rough. And I know that a lot of marriages don't make it. That's when a lot of them decide to split, because boy, it is so hard. And rightfully so. Some marriages do need to split. I don't want to give the message that, stay together at all costs. I don't believe in that either. But thankfully, we were both willing to do the work. Roger was part of an outpatient treatment program when he got home. For 5 days a week for 6 months. He would go to outpatient. It was a huge commitment. It was like a full-time job, and he did it. He committed himself to it every day. And I committed myself to learning and working my own steps and doing my own work. And I did that through family group meetings. I did that through Al-Anon, which is the most beautiful program of learning how we don't have control over others. You could apply that to any situation, but Al-Anon is a beautiful, welcoming group. And I learned that through the 12 steps. And I would go to AA meetings regularly with Roger as a support to him. So I was learning a lot from all these different avenues. And we were growing. We were definitely growing. Now, something had to be done because we had signed the non-compete. And so we had to move out of state for Roger to be able to work in the car industry. And he found a job down in St. George. So we ended up moving our family in July of 2018. We moved our family down to St. George. I'll tell you, that was just what we needed, but it was the hardest thing. All of a sudden, we didn't have all of the family and friends around us. We didn't have the identity that we had. up here in Idaho. Nobody knew us at all. So it was really hard, especially when you have teenagers, to start over in another state like that. It was a lot to expect of them. They were still very proud of their dad, very supportive of their dad. Roger found his AA group right away when we moved down there. And instead of finding a group when I moved to St. George, I dove into so many books. So we were both still growing, but things were not, as they say in AA, the pink cloud had burst. When you're first out of treatment and people who are just new to recovery, there's this pink cloud, like, everything's going to be fine. Everything's going to be great. Look at me. I'm sober. I'm fixed. It's fine. And that bursts pretty quickly when the real world comes along and you have to deal with life on life's terms. So down there was a difficult go for the family. Now, there's part of the story that I skipped over a little bit. I'd like to go back in February of 2018. So Roger had been home from treatment for almost 3 months. My daughter had come to me and said, "Mom, I think my son has a problem with substance." And my oldest son, who had dealt with depression and had that whole experience happen to him, he had started to self-medicate. It had become an issue for him. People often do with depression and anxiety. They often seek an outside source to help things calm down and help everything to just go away. So he had gotten himself caught in a cycle. I was so grateful for her courage to come to me. She loves her brother so much. So I called him. I just called him one day and said, "Hey, why don't you come home? Let's have a talk." And he came home and I said, if I offered to send you to treatment today, would you go? And because he had seen his dad have the courage to better himself and face what he was dealing with in an honest way, he said yes. So there's miracle 10. I don't think that my oldest son would have gone to accept that kind of help had he not witnessed firsthand what it had done for his dad. So he agreed to go, and he's such a loving, wonderful person. He gave me a big hug and he said, "Thank you, Mom." And so he accepted that very willingly. And I drove him down and he went to a place in Draper. And it was just what he needed. And he learned so much there. And that was such a beautiful experience in his life. It really helped shape who he is today. He is sober from those substances today. So I'm so happy that he chose that path for himself. And I want to make it really clear that he and his dad never knew what was going on, with one another. It was a very separate situation. So he went. And so when he got out, he moved to St. George with us. I got to watch another newborn baby come out of treatment. And it wasn't easy, but he did it, and he found a job, and he just kept carrying on, pushing forward and using his tools. So that was a really beautiful thing to witness. And I'm really happy to report that he's very healthy today, and he's a father and a husband, and I'm so proud of him. Recovery is not for the faint of heart. It requires tremendous humility. That was pretty hard for prideful people like us. In the 12 steps, you learn about your character defects, and you learn that some of the things that you loved about yourself were actually not serving you very well. So it was hard to let go of our pride and our egos and have the humility to say, "Hey, I was wrong. I did this wrong, and I'm going to change moving forward." It's hard to do that as spouses, and it's really hard to do that as a parent. But it brought forth an honesty and a newfound trust that we didn't have before. I felt like the kids trusted us more, and were learning to trust themselves more through the process. And as they watched me have boundaries, I watched them gain boundaries for their own selves and have their own self-respect. And it was starting to evolve, and things were, I was seeing a lot of growth starting to happen. Miracle 11 was that one day my husband got a call from a car dealer up here in Idaho. And he said, "Hey, I want to take you to lunch." And Roger said, "Well, I'd love to go to lunch with you, but the problem is I live in St. George now." And he says, "I have a plane and I fly a plane. So I'm going to fly down there and I'm going to take you to lunch today. And I want to talk to you." Roger picked him up from the airport and they went off and had lunch. And he said, "I want to sell one of my dealerships and I want to sell it to you." And he said, "I am so flattered that you would think of me." He says, "But I've signed this non-compete. So let me see what I can do." And we reached out to the buyers, and that is when Miracle 12, are we on 12? The buyers of our previous business agreed that we could buy them out of that portion of the contract. We could buy out of the non-compete. It cost us greatly, but we knew that we needed to get back to Idaho. Our teenagers were starting to suffer. We didn't know anybody. Things were very lonely there, and we knew that we needed to be back. So we were able to come back and start our new dealership. And it has been such a blessing in our lives. It was such a blessing to be able to watch my husband as he once again felt that he had something to offer the community. He really, really values being able to help other people. He's really generous and really good at what he does. And so watching him have that kind of sense of purpose was just a beautiful thing. It really helped him with his self-esteem and his growth. Home, I don't know if it's because, I come from a broken home and bounced around a lot, lived in a lot of different apartment complexes and things like that. But home was so important to me. And I felt like I didn't have it anymore. Ever since we sold that first home, that we had for 15 years, and we built that home, my sense of home was gone. I felt like a refugee. I felt like I was just floating along without a home base, even though, we had bought this home in St. George and it was great. And there just wasn't that sense of home. And so as we were searching for just the right home to find for sale, Miracle 13 came along, and it had just gone on the market that day. And I drove by and it looked real similar to my house that I had built. Had the same brick and the same porch, same front door. It was the same coloring on the outside, beautiful landscaping, all these similarities. And then when I met the realtor and walked through it, I just knew it needed a good remodel. And I was up for that. I was up for that challenge. But I knew that this is going to be the place where we call home. This was going to be the place that would really cradle us and shelter us while we heal, and we could host our family and welcome everyone, and the love could really grow and blossom there once again. So we were able to buy that house and started the remodel in 2020. It now, it looks like it's a reflection of us, and it feels wonderful. And not to sound too materialistic, but it was something that I really needed to heal. I don't know how that sounds, but
no, I think it's
that home base.
Yeah, I think it's huge. The statement that keeps coming to my mind is God will restore all that has been lost. I'm going to cry because I think what you gave up to get through the healing, you got back. And I just think it's beautiful.
Thank you, Liza. I love that. So true. It is so true. He will restore it, and there will be beauty for ashes.
Mm-hmm. You getting your home, your husband getting his dealership, like just so many beautiful things.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for recognizing that. And that either of those things weren't even the most beautiful thing. The most beautiful thing. Every Sunday we do this thing called High and Low. I'm sure a lot of families have that kind of similar tradition, but we go around and talk about, the highs of the week, the lows of the week. And there's been many times that we were all together as a family all around the table. Roger has been able to express that his sobriety meant so much to him, that his sobriety and his recovery were the high. And when I look around the table when he says that and watch all of his kids just looking at him with this love and this smile, and they're so proud of him, that is the most beautiful thing that has been restored to our family. They respect it. No one is ashamed of it. And we shouldn't have to be. There's been a lot of times since we've lived where we live now that, I feel judgment and things like that. But I've come to realize that the level of judgment that people have equals their level of fear. And they're really just afraid. They're afraid of the word drug use. They're afraid of the word addict. Sometimes they're afraid of the word recovery. There is no need to be afraid. It is the most beautiful transformational gift to be able to say, this is my problem, and I'm going to try and fix it. So there is nothing to be ashamed of. My message to other people going through this, other families going through this, is that there is a way forward. Oftentimes, you will feel like there is no way forward, that you're just stuck in that deep pit and there's no way to get out. And I'm telling you that there is a way. There is a way. Individually, there is a way. The only reason why Roger and I are still able to have a wonderful marriage and things are good now is because as individuals, we had to do our work individually. It's hard, but it is so very worth it. And then you get to teach it to your children. So now we are a family that speaks the language of recovery. And I love that, because it will serve each of us well and serve my children well as they move throughout their lives and deal with life. It's a good, sound psychological practice.
Well, I've been crying along with you. It is a beautiful story. And I'm so touched by growth. That's like my favorite thing. When you see someone who has had the opportunity to grow in such miraculous ways, I think that is why we came here to the planet. And when people actually embrace it and go all in on that growth, I teach child development. I love human development. I love that process of growing and becoming who we really are and shedding off the conditioning and our traumas and the things that set us on the rocky path of life. And we find our way to our truth, to our best self, our God, and all of those. I just think it's miraculous. And your story demonstrates that. And I am so happy for both you and Roger and all of your children. And I really do see that God has restored all that was lost. And I've been promised that as well in my life. And it's something that I hold really dear.
I feel of your happiness for me, and I feel of your love for me. Thank you, Liza.
You now currently help, right? So what work are you doing now with recovery and 12 steps? Are you involved in that?
Roger and I were leaders for 12-step meetings for 2 years. We had the opportunity with that to go into the jails. And that is, oh boy, that was just the most beautiful opportunity. Being there, I've never, ever felt the spirit so strong as I had sitting inside the jail with those beautiful people. So that was wonderful for us. I hope that what we've learned, might have helped them, but really that helped us so much. Roger continues to serve on the local AA chapter, and I have a meeting in my home. I help women who are navigating a loved one in addiction or are navigating their own codependency. So I run a meeting in my home, and I am actually looking to expand that in the future. I want to bring this message and this work to as many people as I can.
I love that. And I think it's a very needed work. I love the codependency aspect of it because I think so many people are blind to the fact that they're codependent. And when they recognize it, I myself have been very codependent. And when you finally understand what it is, setting boundaries, learning how to have that self-respect, it does change, and it offers so much growth and power to people, gives them their lives back. So I love that you're doing that so much.
I love it. It's exciting work to watch the light bulb kind of go off and people say, "Oh, I thought that I was being loving."
Mm-hmm.
When really it's not a loving act.
Mm-mm.
Codependency is not a loving act.
Mm-hmm. And it's tricky to see, like it's hard to recognize. And so when you can recognize it and then take ownership of yourself and your behavior, people change, lives change. So I think I would like to learn from you actually. So let me know when your meetings are, because I know I still have a lot to learn about that. So where can people find you if they want to work with you, if they want to learn about codependency and addiction recovery and all of the things that you offer and help? How can people get in contact and get in touch with you?
They can email me. My email is stef.sheehy, SHEEHY @gmail.com.
Okay, perfect. Do you do things online?
That's in the works. That's in
Mm-hmm.
the works. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Perfect.
Right now, it's just something personal in my home, but I can do it over Zoom as well. Yeah, there's a lot that's going to be happening there.
That's exciting. That is very exciting. I just want to thank you for sharing your journey, your story, being vulnerable, having the courage to share all the things that you have. And I love how you identified each miracle, because that is so important to notice. Where did God intervene? Where did he show up? And sometimes they're small and you might miss it. But when you really, I love how you pointed it out, like this was a miracle and this was a miracle and this was a miracle, where we maybe wouldn't think of it that way, but they are. And so I love all of the miracles that you saw during this journey.
There were a lot. Thank you, Liza. Thanks for the opportunity.
All right, there's our episode for this week. I just want to thank Stefani so much for sharing her miracle journey with us. I love at the beginning, she talked about shame. So much of us don't share the miracles in our lives or the hard things in our lives because we're ashamed of them. That shame doesn't allow the healing to take place. And so I think that's one of the first steps. I love that she mentioned that at the beginning. When you can overcome the shame and the fear of others' judgments and the fear of your own judgments, then healing can take place. Then you can go on the journey. It does take a lot of humility. And her and Roger are beautiful examples of facing the hard truth of life with courage, with trust, with humility, and they have seen the miracles that have come from that journey. So with this new year coming up, maybe take an inventory in your life. Where am I needing to grow, to change, to heal? Where am I hiding? Shame is a hiding energy. Where am I hiding the truth from myself and others that would benefit me to deal with? I just want to encourage us to take a look, do some self-reflection in our own lives and find areas where we need recovery, where we need to grow and learn and help ourselves in that inner work. So Stefani, thank you for inspiring me to do that and others as well. And for the work that you're doing with so many people. It's beautiful. I also want to encourage others who are on a journey of healing to grab this book. It's called Heaven Will Find You by Sheldon Lawrence. This book is a journey of hope and healing. It takes place in the afterlife, but it is based on real, true near-death experiences. But it is what Stefani was talking about, this journey of recovery, this journey of discovering ourselves, this journey of facing the hard things in ourselves and healing from them. It's a beautiful, beautiful story. So you can find that book on Amazon.com or at wondersandmiracles.com and start your new year off right. Heaven can help you. Heaven will find you. It wants to help you on your journey. And there are miracles all around us. Notice those things, because the more miracles we notice, the more miracles happen.